This video is going to show how to set up screen sharing on Ubuntu for the Raspberry Pi so that you can get a remote desktop connection and view the graphical user interface of the desktop, which is needed for certain applications like running Electron Cache or basically anything that has a graphical user implementation. And it's generally, it's nice because this allows you to run your Pi 400 or your Raspberry Pi 4 without needing a physical monitor. So just to cap on this, because remote desktop is a technology that has been around for a long time, there's a lot of different protocols and software out there. It can be really confusing if you just Google like remote desktop. Ubuntu comes with a default remote desktop system. The package is known as GNOME Remote Desktop. And so that's what's used as the VNC server. And then Ramina is the VNC client that ships by default with Ubuntu. So the first step is to enable screen sharing on the Raspberry Pi, and then the second step is to connect with it via the VNC. Now I've got my Raspberry Pi next to me, and I'm logged in here remotely using SSH. And so I've already got it set up, so what I'm going to do is connect to it with Ramina, and then I can show you the remote desktop and how I set that up. But I'm on a Ubuntu machine right here, which is very similar. So I'm running Ubuntu on both machines. The way you would set this up is you go to Settings, and then go to Sharing and Screen Sharing, and I already have mine active. You click this slider to make it active, allow connections. This ask for access thing is like confusing, doesn't really work very good, so set a password. It doesn't really matter what it is, and then it'll have you select a network connection, which usually there's just one. So that's how you would set it up. I'm using the computer that I'm on and recording this as the client, so I'll be connecting from this computer to the Raspberry Pi. So Ramina, I believe, is installed by default. If not, you can go to a terminal and go sudo apt install Ramina. And let's just see what happens when I do that. I was expecting it to tell me that it was the latest was already installed, but I'm just going to cancel out of that because I do already have it installed, and I've already got the Raspberry Pi set up 192.168.2.123, and I have it set up for a password as I showed. And if I make this full screen, so now I am logged into the remote desktop, and what I wanted to show here was the screen sharing setup that I have. So I'm remotely viewing the Raspberry Pi 400, and it's the same system where I went into Settings, went to Sharing, turned on Screen Sharing, and I set a password. This is the Wi-Fi that it's connected to. If you notice, I use the IP address to connect to it, and that works fine. What I want to do, I want to show that I can actually connect to it using that trout pi 400.local. That also works. But again, use this password setting because I was not able to get it to work properly when I use the other setting. Let me just show that real quick. Screen sharing. So again, like this new connections must ask for access. I was not able to figure out how to make that work. I used the password and that worked. So what I just showed is being able to connect to this auto-generated URL or just the IP address. They both work. And so there you go. Now you can easily connect to it. And if you're on a Windows or Mac, all you need to the steps for the Raspberry Pi is exactly the same. All you need to do is find an alternative client for your operating system, a VNC client specifically. So there's real VNC, there's tight VNC, there's this Ramina. If you Google around for VNC client for your operating system, you'll find stuff. But if you're on an Ubuntu machine like I am, Ramina ships by default and it works really good. This is sort of the Ubuntu recommended way to go about this.